Hello everyone, this is the maybe third time I've tried doing this channel again. Hopefully this time there is a lot more better quality and light sound quality, the whole shebang. So I thought I would start off with something simple but very exciting, and that is my 2024 favorite reads of the year. Now, this year wasn't the best reading year. I honestly, sadly enough to say, I don't think I've had a good reading year since 2019. But there were some very good surprises this year, and I am very excited to talk about them, and they kind of made the whole year worth it in terms of reading. So let's start off with honorable mentions. Actually, first honorable mention I have is Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. This was a big surprise for me, especially because I've been so disappointed with any sort of romance plus fantasy element books, romantasy this year. This one was a little bit different. It was gearing more towards romance and sci-fi, but obviously leaning heavily towards the romance. I think just romantasy plus kind of like a sci-fi contemporary bent. It's about this girl. By the way, I've kind of forgotten a lot of these summaries, so kind of bear with me. I'm going to do the best I can from what I remember. So yes, I was very surprised about this. It is about a woman whose mother died by very mysterious reasons that she doesn't know. A lot of people think that it was because of suicide, but she doesn't think so. She writes an essay and submits it to her school. Someone reads it, thinks that it's very impressive, and she gets accepted into this very mysterious school. And along the way, she is kind of discovering what actually killed her mother. I think the great thing about Carrie Lake's writing is that she puts in so much effort into the world building. Like, the vibes were here in this book. Very gothic, dark. I think like almost like Mr. Jake. Was it Dr. Jake? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That kind of atmosphere. There's also a central romance to this book, and it's between her and her professor. And while they were sort of had the caricatures of stereotypical romantasy setup, like a very broody male main character, there was just so much more depth to this, and I think the main reason for that is because she takes her time to develop these characters and she delays the spice until later, which I honestly really appreciate, and that is something that not a lot of romantasy authors do these days. And it really shows that because of this, she really cares more about her characters than just the getting to the spice, right? And on that note, I have another Carrie Lake book on this honorable mentions list. It's just a Carrie Lake year. Anathema, also by Miss Carrie Lake. This is her newest book in a duology. This one, it has a deeper fantasy setting to it, so but definitely lends into like the gothic horror aspect. So lots of gruesome creatures, lots of crow imagery, right? And again, I can't believe she has to put in this disclaimer at the beginning of the book, but she says that, the spice is coming, you just have to be patient. And I just cannot believe that has to be a disclaimer now. I really don't. I think this book is all the more stronger because she delays the spice, to be honest, because you really get to go on this journey with these characters, and there's a lot of found family aspects to this book as well. And as dark as it is, there is still humor in this book too. So all around, a very honestly decent and well-rounded romantasy, and I can't believe my standards are that low now. But honestly, this is a great, fun book, and that's entertaining, and that doesn't make me feel gross and bad after. So that's all I can. And honestly, that is all I really ask for now from romantasy. So yes, Anathema. I'll be sure to check out the second book whenever it comes out. Honestly, Carrie Lake, lifesaver for this genre, I swear. And now, I also have a best romance book. Romance probably won't ever really make it to my favorites list, because romance is not my genre of choice. But Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver, I am in the minority in the sense that I love a good celebrity romance because I like to see how the non-celebrity in the couple kind of react to stardom. And I think that some authors do it very well, some authors don't. In this case, I think that it was kind of neutral. It was kind of hard to remember that the main female character was even a singer in the first place, a famous singer in the first place, because it wasn't like anything that came with her fame really affected her in the book. Like, for example, like if you've seen Notting Hill, right? In that movie, there's a point in the movie where she gets bombarded with paparazzi, right? And they, as a couple, have to decide how to continue this relationship when she's in the spotlight so much. Not really the case with this book. The celebrityness of everything, it kind of really takes a backseat and is actually pretty much silenced for the most part, which is fine. I really liked the kids in this book. They were kind of fun. And I really like our male main character too, because he was just not that serious and just a funny guy, which I really like because that means this book doesn't take itself too seriously, right? Which I feel like a lot of, especially like Grumpy Sunshine books, not that this book is one, but I feel like a lot of romances with more serious male main characters, it can be a bit taxing and take itself too seriously, but West, the male main character in this book, chef's kiss. Just a funny guy, funny stand-up guy, and we love that. We love that. Now, on to my favorite books of 2024, of which there are slim pickings, people. I only have 4, of which one of them is a reread. So, yeah, not an amazing reading year. But again, these books were really good. So, the first one is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which I actually read in January of last year, actually. So it's been a while since I've read this book, but it's kind of stuck with me since then. This is the 3rd book in the Poppy War series by R.F. Kuang. All the books in this series I have loved so much, and this book is absolutely no exception. There is just no mercy for our main character, no sort of break or gentleness, tenderness towards this character. She goes through it in this book. And I think what I really like about this book too is that the main female character, Rin, she changes, right, throughout the book, but not necessarily for the better, which I really enjoy. This is, I think she is the definition of a true anti-hero, in my opinion. because I'm noticing this trend, especially in I mean, this is not a romantasy, but I'm noticing this trend a lot in romantasy, where they're kind of presented as an anti-hero, but they're not really anti-heroes. They just do bad things for very, very good reasons. Like, oh, I just murdered someone to protect my mom, right? Like, really, that doesn't really make you an anti-hero, right? Rin is a true anti-hero, and I really like it too, because you actually really don't see a lot of female anti-heroes in fantasy in general. So she's just such a unique character, in my opinion, which I love, absolutely love. So I really enjoyed that. I think personally, and this might be a controversial opinion, that the Poppy War series is R.F. Kuang's best series. Her best series, yes. I think that this one, compared to Babel especially, this series is not so overt when it's talking about the themes of colonialism like it is in Babel. In Babel, it feels almost like a beginner's primer on colonialism, and there's not much room for gray characters, morally gray characters, nuanced characters. But that's what I really liked about her writing in the Poppy War series, is that everyone's just trying to do their best in a shitty world right now, and sometimes our bad insecurities, our addictions get the better of us, and there is no right answer. There is no right answer, and I felt like that was explored very well in the Poppy War series. I want her to kind of return back to fantasy like this, and that's not to say that Babel didn't have its strengths. I love the world building in Babel, just as I love the world building in here too. It's definitely one of her strong suits, but I think this one is a lot stronger in exploring these themes of colonialism and violence and all that kind of stuff, much better than it was in Babel. So that's my first favorite of the year. By the way, these are in no particular order. The second book is actually a nonfiction called Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. This is a nonfiction about the author's experiences dealing with ADHD personally, and not me personally, what am I doing? And kind of describing these exploring kind of the deeper minds of people with ADHD. And as someone who works in mental health, I think this one shed so much light on why people with ADHD are the way they are. And it goes beyond, explaining symptoms and all that clinical stuff. It goes into kind of the mindset of someone with ADHD and why they might have turned out the way they did. It really focuses a lot on the environmental pressures that might, predispose someone to ADHD. And it really opened my eyes a lot to it. And it really is very gentle with this film. Really, it's almost as much a writing on the author redeeming himself, should I say, in his eyes, and really kind of forgiving himself for a lot of the things and kind of improving the things that he's done in his past as well. And yeah, just explaining why he is the way he is. And he even offers kind of these treatments and things like that. Not in depth. Like, this is no medical textbook. This is very much a personal memoir with added clinical observations, because he is a doctor. So really liked this one, and I would recommend this to anyone who has ADHD or anyone who knows anyone who has ADHD. So there was that one. The third book, one of my favorite books of the year, this was a huge surprise to me, and that is The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. I cannot believe there is a world in which I did not continue onwards with this series after the Bone season, because as of this point I've read everything but the most recent release. So I think it's called, I've read The Song Rising, I'm on The Mask Following, and this series honestly just keeps getting better and better. The Mime War is my personal favorite, which is the second book after the Bone season. And if you don't know, the Bone season is about a woman named Paige. I would say this veers into YA to adult fantasy, kind of veers that border. It's about our main character Paige, who in her world there are two groups of people. One is there are clairvoyants, people who can kind of see spirits, and then the second group of people, Amerotics, they can't see spirits. Clairvoyants also have powers associated with spirits. Our main character has a very rare power in that she can inhabit other people's dreamscapes. And I like to think of dreamscapes kind of like in the show Sherlock, where he has kind of like a mind palace where he kind of sees everything, kind of represents like your mental space, your soul, if you will. But there's other different sorts of powers as well, so you can there's lots of people who get possessed by spirits, and they can do a lot of creative things, like draw really great paintings. You can also use spirits to attack people for you. In this world, clairvoyants are seen as unnaturals. That's the derogatory term for them, and they're being hunted by the government at large, right? The general public opinion towards clairvoyants is very negative, and so clairvoyants can't really get really decent jobs. So Paige, our main character, is actually working kind of with a criminal gang. She kind of does odd jobs. She's what is called a molisher, so basically someone who basically enforces the rules of her boss, whose name is Jackson, and she kind of beats people up, just, doing her thing. One day she gets captured and sent to a secret colony, and there she realizes that her world is so much bigger than the criminal underworld she was a part of, and that her role in this world is so big, and that's kind of where the story sets off. If I really think about it, reading the second book versus the Bone season is actually quite filler. Even though there is a good plot and everything, oh my gosh, the writing and the plot and the pacing improves so much from book 1 to book 2. Like, it is so good. I think the Bone season just feels more like a world building kind of book, because now that I've read the second and third, and right now fourth book, every single book she really builds upon this world, and she has Samantha Shannon has such a talent for world building. Everything is so immersed in this world, and it is every single magic rule that happens is built upon in books thereafter too, and they bring real consequences. But it's also a sort of revolution book too, as in further books Paige realizes kind of what her role is in the clairvoyant world and how they are seen in the outside world. It is so epic too. It is an urban fantasy, and it takes place in London, and in the fourth book in France. So it's just a different type of setting just in general. There's also a wonderful romance that is on and off and just complicated, and I love it so much. the more I read of Samantha Shannon's books, the more I realized actually how funny she is. Her humor is quite dry and wry, but it just works so well with her characters. I love all these characters with my whole heart. I think Paige is an awesome main character. Yeah, I had a tough time getting into the second book too, but I think that was because I was busy. But once I got into it, man, I had never had so much fun reading a fantasy in such a long time, and this book reminded me of why I love fantasy so much, especially this kind of fantasy romp with endearing characters, a great romance that doesn't just conclude in the first book, and just so much tension, action, pace, just makes you forget that you're reading a book, and it becomes so seamless in your mind. If you had reservations about the first book, I would highly recommend moving on, because the world expands so much in the second book and continues to do so in the rest of the series. I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. It's going great places. This series is just so underrated, it should be way more popular than it is. So yeah, the Mind Border. And then the last one, my favorite of the year, is actually a reread, and it is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. If you do not know what this book is about, it is about 4 characters, all of whom are friends. If the book follows somewhat all of these characters, but really focuses mostly on our main character, Jude. Jude has lived a very tumultuous life. By the way, this book is literary fiction, and a very slice of life kind of follows Jude and his friends throughout, from I think their 30s all the way onwards to almost like their 50s, I think. Again, Jude has lived a very tumultuous life, and he is very secretive about his past. All of his friends know that something bad has happened to him in the past. He self-harms a lot, and really essentially does not want to be on this earth. And we kind of follow him through kind of like his mental headspace and his friendships, and ultimately his past and what has made him the way he is now. It is about memory, it is about trauma, it is about how we come back from trauma. Do we come back from trauma, right? I see how this book, the last time I read this book was 10 years ago, so most of it a lot of it I kind of forgot, but I read it again this second time, and it was just as heart-wrenching. It's really hard to explain why I like this book so much, but if I could summarize it in one word, and it might be surprising, is this book is creative. And I mean creative in 2 senses. 1, through the writing style, and 2, through the themes that this book tries to touch upon. I see why this book is very controversial, because it is creative in the sense that it goes against what we as a society would like to believe about trauma. And although Jude does not represent all people who have had traumas in their past, he does represent some of it, some of what people believe, and some of what people do experience in real life. And I think what really hit home for me when I was watching or listening to a podcast with Hana Yanagihara, and why she chose to make the story so very sad, right? There are bad things happening to Jude, like constantly, really, and there's kind of no relenting. And she said that, I wrote, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I wrote this book, the point of the book was not to make Jude's life sad for the sake of being sad. The point was to have this character bear witness, or have us bear witness to people's lives, and some people's lives are miserable. So I think that really hit home for me. Definitely an interesting character arc, because he doesn't change throughout the book and his mindset. He tries to, but in the end he doesn't. And I think that's so fascinating too. And that's such a creative and bold choice to make, because in this type of book we are looking for Jude to have a cathartic moment, right? We're looking for him to get better. But he doesn't. He really doesn't. And it is sad, but it's truthful, I think, for a lot of people. And it makes his journey all the more, I think, touching to me. So this book is bold in so many ways, and I really appreciate it for that. And I personally do not think it is trying to, I could wax poetic about this book. I personally do not think it is trying to say that people with trauma can never come back from it. But it is saying, I think, that some people don't. And I think a lot of it too is kind of a thought experiment too. Like, how much can one person really handle? It's a thought experiment. And even Hana Yanagihara said herself that a lot of the emotions portrayed in this book are bigger than life. She kind of wanted to expound on everything and make everything bigger than life, even though it's set in our contemporary world. Like, for example, there's a lot of imagery of trees and nature and fairy tales. It's set in, although we recognize the world, it's not set in any specific timeline, and she never mentions a specific time, date, year. So it's a story that's very like suspended in here. I think the writing is very sentimental, despite it being literary fiction, which is what makes it pretty readable. I think it's just kind of one of those books where if you get it, and if you don't, you don't, and it's fine. But I think a lot of the discourse around this book, I kind of disagree with. So, on that happy note, I'm probably not honestly gonna make another whole video on A Little Life, because I love it so much. But those were my 4 favorite books of the year. Yeah, I am looking forward to 2025. I think that I have set some new goals for myself in 2025 to try and read books that I will genuinely like. And here's to some great books for the next year. All right. I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.